of course, revered statesman and global icon of governance and democracy. The Namibian Broadcasting Corporation, of course, has been hands on deck since the news of the passing was announced on early morning Sunday by the then Vice President, now the fourth President of the country, and of course starting over the broadcast on that very Sunday with one of our veteran producers and presenters, Kadambire Mbruka. And since that first day, of course, we've been hands on deck to bring you all the information related to the memorial as well as all the activities around the passing of the late President. And now I'm joined in studio by the Director General of the NBC to just give us some insights in terms of how will the readiness by the NBC and the plan for coverage over the next few days as we lead up to the funeral of our late statesman. A very good morning to you, Comrade DJ, and thank you so much for making time out to join us.
Yeah, good morning, Ricardo, and also good morning to the viewers. Thank you very much.
Well, if we look at, of course, in terms of what has happened, we know that it's an unprecedented event. It's the first time that the country is experiencing something like this. But before we talk about the future plans, let's just reflect on the initial reaction and the steps that you had taken to, on that very day, suspend programming and some of the steps that were taken really to bring that information to us on the Sunday.
Yeah, I think for starters, this is something that none of us expected to happen. So naturally, it caught all of us by surprise. But be that as it may, as soon as the information became available to us, part of what we needed to do was put in place systems that would help the current and the president who's in office now to formally make the announcement. So a whole chain of events took place. And I think at the time there were 3 people that were actively involved in this. It was Mr. Stephen Kotze, I think Blanche, and then Karipi from the nerve center of actually doing the transmission. But by the time we reached about 8 o'clock in the morning, the NBC machinery was already now in full force. Yes, running to make sure that both from a radio, television and online perspective, that we had to be there to start informing. And one of the first things that we did was to immediately bring a change into the normal program schedule and all of that, which worked well for us. I think by, depending from station to TV, by 10, 11, 12, we were on board because we had to hit the ground running on this one. And we were all of us dealing in our different perspectives with this idea, like, is it real? And then, yes, because the acting, who was the vice at the time, had to make this announcement. So we were also processing other things in our minds. I think by the time we reached the afternoon, we were now at least at a space.
And then at that stage now, it's the swearing-in ceremony, that provision has to be made for that as well.
Yes, yeah. So all of those things, and remember it was a weekend as well. And normally on weekends, we have an element of scaling down on operations. But then the teams, on their own, Ricardo, just started calling. Where can I help? What can I do? So we ended up by the evening time, we already had the machinery really, really running. Hence, from the Monday onwards, it was full steam all the way. We changed our schedule. We actually went as current as can be up until where we are today. And remember, we now had to deal with multiple productions because the needs in terms of what needed to happen were coming from all corners of the country. And we just realized then that, our resources now were really, really put to the test. And also our agility and ability to be able to react real time in this matter, both for radio and TV and online, was truly put to the test. But I think I can safely say that we've managed to get to and live up to the standards.
So far, of course, when this happened, we've been seeing that the coverage has taken a sort of a flow approach. Of course, we'll start with conversations here, but even before lunchtime already, the viewers online will be plugged in and radio will be plugged in as well. Just talk to us about the multimedia approach of making sure that all bases are covered in terms of information sharing. Yeah,
look, for us, the plans that we had was that we would be implementing what we're going through now as of 1st of April. And the event itself actually, in a way, fast-tracked that move for us as well. And now we had to think about, once a discussion is on air, what happens next? And so it had to go. So the aspect of being within the news, current, but still dissect, give flesh, try and understand, get as diverse views as one can, that actually became a natural occurrence within whatever we were doing. And for that, I, as I was saying a couple of times, I'm not too sure, I might have run out of words. I really need to thank the team within NBC, all over the country, to say and recognize that they've stepped up the game. And the problem with that, Ricardo, now is that the bar is that high now. It cannot come down. It can stay there, or it must go higher.
Higher, yeah.
And that's the challenge that we are having. So we are rooted in this understanding of saying that in terms of where we are, we know it best. Nobody else can tell us. And for what we've been doing every day, second day more or less, I'd be meeting with core members of the team, discussing. I think you were privy to one such meeting this morning as well. Definitely. I've been leading that ever since then, just to make sure that we're focused, we look at things, and we try and relay as much as we can about what is happening within the whole country, to the extent of dovetailing with entities outside Namibia as well, linking up, making sure that the aspect of mourning and recognizing is handled at a level where Namibians can really and truly share in this.
One of the other aspects, of course, is that because of the fact that NBC is a public broadcaster now, there is an inherent, I think, obligation. A lot of people are just waiting to say, look, whatever was announced, we need to double check with NBC. Okay, so the funeral will be on the 25th. Was it announced on NBC? Just talk to us about that role that you play in terms of ensuring also that as fast as the information is being communicated, there's a very clear line of communication with government, and just double checking that whatever we announced on air is really the information that's coming from the organizing committees.
And a very good point that you are raising. I think one of the things that I've made clear when I came as Director General was always to say that the validation of integrity, insofar as information is concerned, must become a key pillar in terms of what we do. That is why it's by no wonder today if something is trending, someone will ask, what is NBC saying? So we have over time become that point where people will go and say, no, I've heard this, but what is NBC saying? So what that does is it puts a lot of pressure on us to make sure that we get the information soonest, so that we can still communicate as fast as possibly we can. And here I also want to commend our line ministry for making sure that at all times that the currency around information that people need to hear is coming through unprecedented. One, they will be making use of their own platform, which is the Government Information Center, and outside that, all our platforms, be both for radio and TV online, have also been running in tandem to make sure that there is no lapse or lack of information coming through, but knowing that it is authentic.
So there's a tight established collaboration
very
with
tight,
MICT.
Very tight, very tight, very tight, particularly from them pronouncing on behalf of government.
A lot of work, of course, with regards to this, as we know that the president was a global icon. He was a revered statesman also on the continent, a Pan-Africanist. And coincidentally, the NBC, of course, also holds the chairmanship of the Southern African Broadcasting Association. Reflect on the collaboration with the rest of the region and some of the expectations that are coming from there in as far as coverage is concerned of the events.
Strikingly so, when we launch Iron SADC, which is the regional Sabah SADC news program that is currently running, I think 1:30 in the afternoons, and normally it gets a repeat somewhere later. The late was actually the one who launched it in 2018 when it went on air. So there is an element of affinity from us within Sabah, because as president I sit with the public broadcasters within the region as well. So immediately when this came through, I wrote to all of them, because we share a platform, indicating that, colleagues, this is what has happened. If you need any news, the NBC will provide. But then we went a step further, saying that after discussing with the senior principals from a shareholder perspective, we agreed that within SADC we will avail the signal. and that process is running quite well. We're dovetailing with MultiChoice DSTV in that regard, and thanks to Mr. Roger Gertz and his team as well. What typically will happen now is that within the region, all those countries that have access to MultiChoice, on Saturday and coming Saturday and Sunday, we will open up the signal via DSTV MultiChoice.
That's not for the rest of sub-Saharan Africa,
Yes,
outside
yeah,
of SADC.
Yeah, and no, within.
Within SADC.
Yeah,
as well.
because remember, if I'm not mistaken, I think their footprint goes as far as Nigeria. But for entities outside the footprint of what MultiChoice is covering, we're setting up a separate element of connectivity, which we will also then announce as early as Thursday. So we've already had some private stations within South Africa as well, checking, and others abroad asking how this will do. So technically, all of that is currently in place for us. So we will be able to make sure. And just to give you an example, within SADC alone, I think population size is close to 390 million.
Yes.
So if we take an effect of 30% of them watching, you're looking at 150 million people that can tune into that on the day within SADC. If you then take the continental number, I think we are about 1.4 billion people on the continent, and you take the same percentage, we're looking at close to about 440 million that potentially can log on to the day and be part of what we are doing, not even taking into account the off spins that would be coming from any other person who's outside the continent itself. So we're easily looking at close to most probably 500 plus numbers in terms of those that will have access.
And that is just on terrestrial television. I mean, that excludes the online,
yes,
potential online
that
viewers
excludes,
globally.
because from our end, we will be streaming the service live on NBC Plus. We will also be streaming it live on the YouTube platforms as well. And then, of course, as this is going and growing, ultimately, we could get to a point where we could actually judge what the numbers could be. And also understanding that the popularity and the aspect of how well known the late was, it transcends. I mean, we've seen the past 2 weeks. It's people from all over. So our job as the host entity that must make sure that this is happening, we sit in that position where we must make sure that the signal goes out to those who would want it.
The other consideration, of course, is also NBC has other stakeholders, such as particularly the commercial stakeholders. People buy ad space, they would have had their ads running during these days and so forth. What is the response been from some of those stakeholders? Are they fine with the understanding that it's not business as usual over the next few weeks?
Yeah, for us, and it's a good point that you are raising, we had to go back to our normal advertisers, informing them to say that, look, the country is finding itself now in this space. So we will not be able to cater for your needs, even contractually. And we seek for your indulgence in that regard. In fact, I have a pending meeting with our executive director in that regard. The event is what it is, but business is also business. But some of them understand, some of them it's difficult because they're also driving a hard bargain. Yeah. But it doesn't matter which way one looks at it. Point is that we are where we are now, and this is something that needs to be happening here. So we're trying to find the best balancing act that we can get. But for us as Namibians, this is something that we didn't know. We had to take the bull by the horns, and from an NBC perspective, we had to do the best that we can in order to relay, share, and make sure that people are part of the whole process.
And what's been incredible, of course, to witness also for some of us is how the administrative hats have really come on from the leadership side, and it's everybody speaking the technical language. Talking about the technical language, let's look at the coverage itself. We know, of course, that there are a number of key flashpoints that we're expecting. Of course, we know the airport is going to be quite busy, also Kutako, as well as Eros Airport, because of the amount of heads of state and international dignitaries that will be coming. I know that the president of Botswana really likes the Eros Airport. So, but then we also have Casa Rosalia, the private residence that will be busy. We've got some of the venues for memorials, etc. Just take us through a bit bird's eye view of how you're looking at the coverage
Yeah.
over those 3 days, the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday?
Even before we get to the weekend, if one just reflects on what has been happening for the past 2 weeks, you would have seen that we have been able to connect regionally. And that also a great sign for us to say that, and for me in particular as Director General, knowing that at least there is a level of maturity technically that has come through. People have stepped up. The courage that these journalists are having, some of them very young, but saying, no, I will go live, I will be there, I will contribute. And as you might have seen the past couple of weeks, we've seen now within either your programs or within the news, from time to time we go to any of the regions where we have the ability, technical ability to actually connect live to that. So that as well is also part of what gives us comfort to say that, look, we believe that we are in good space. And then just about 2 days back, I was sitting with the main teams discussing particularly the upcoming Saturday and Sunday, indicating that, look, MICT is there. They also have technical equipment. Let's have chats with them as well, so that we can get the overall national feel to that as well. And we are also speaking to the NMH group as well, because they also run their own station as well. And that given that the issue around the late was for everybody, we felt that, well, let's take hands, let's make sure that
So
things
the collaboration with the private sector media houses.
Yes, it's there, it's running quite well. I just spoke now to the operations head of department, giving me comfort that in fact they're going on a recce now on some of the sites to go there. Now let's quickly focus on the Saturday. The Saturday is a rather confined event that will be happening within a setting. That one is relatively, let me not use the word easy.
Be careful now.
Yeah, but it's one that where we have comfort because everything is controlled. That's the setting. The one that we had to put a little bit of time, we just discussed it this morning, is the Sunday, where the actual funeral is happening. Remember, there will be that procession as well, from the Independence Stadium up to Heroes Acre. Now, part of what we've been doing is there is a floor plan idea, which we've plotted to say that as this will be going through and going up to the final resting place, if I would be a listener and a viewer and an onliner, NBC should be in a position to actually narrate real time and tell the story visually how it is happening. So now, that brings us now to what you were asking. There will be senior people, heads of states arriving. So we will have presence in the studio. We most probably will have presence at all the airports, the two main ones. And then we will have presence at CASA. We will have to have presence at the Independence Arena. And then, of course, along the way as we are moving. And also ultimately at Heroes Acre. And that takes a bit of thinking to make sure that you do have that seamless narration and running of what we have. And particularly for people like yourselves who would be narrating. It was important this morning that I sat with you and also just gave you a view as to what we are thinking. And I have comfort with the teams from my side, NBC, in that I believe that we will be able to pull this off. And hence I can say that our state of readiness is there. The only thing that I will be discussing with our ED in about an hour or two would be, the acts of God, which we do not have control over, but we will have to find ways of mitigating the risk associated with that as well. And our team, under the leadership of Mrs. Munir and Mr. Dank, are also almost daily now meeting with the teams that are dealing with the planning from a government perspective as well. So from where we are, we believe we are fine. And yesterday, I just wrote a letter now to Mr. Herzer from MultiChoice DSTV Namibia, also indicating that they have the rights for the two events, but only limited to that.
To the official programs for the 2 days.
Yeah, because other programs the issue of rights then becomes an issue, because territorially, many of the stuff that we don't own but that we acquire from somewhere, you get rights that will indicate you can only sort of like play that in your country.
In terms of radio, of course, we know radio, about 78% of the country still uses a radio as a primary source of news. Just reflect a little bit on that. We know that the radio has been part of the broadcast plan over the last 2 weeks, but just to provide that assurance to the radio listeners.
That is also covered 100%, as was discussed and agreed, and particularly this morning as well. For most of them, the main feed will be coming from where we sit as a nerve center. But then, as we break out the signal, importantly so, for the services, in terms of the language spoken on each and every service, the managers will have to make sure, and the media planners, that we have presenters that can follow what is happening. And then in the language in which they're broadcasting, then make sure that they take the listeners along as well. Same. They must also then get analysts who can assist them in understanding how some of these things are nicely falling into place, so that we can, even just from a radio perspective, make sure that nobody feels that they are not part of the whole event as it is unfolding, which we have been doing, by the way.
Last but not least, Comrade Hage, I have to ask, in terms of the international languages, we know continentally we've got the Lusophone and the French.
Yeah.
I can do some French and German, but I don't know about the Portuguese. We will be expected to switch the languages in the broadcast, or how are we approaching that?
Well, the approach has always been, from a broadcaster's perspective, that you will get what they give. And then you receiving will then have to make sure that you ensure that your audience understands what is happening. And Peter brought in quite a good example with the funeral, with the passing of President Fidel Castro.
Cuba.
We got all of that within the language that they speak. So it was up to us now to make sure then that by the time it reaches the ordinary Namibian, that it could be in English. So that will be something that whoever is taking the signal, that they will have to deal with. Predominantly from a television perspective, we will be broadcasting in English, yeah.
The final one is just on the Friday street possession. We know that there's one on Friday as well. Will we also be covering that one?
Well, that one I have given over to news to deal with it, like they've been dealing with all other coverage in terms of where they are. But I got the assurance that yes, it will be covered. As to what the format will be, that I don't know. I'm not too sure exactly how, but there will be a reflection. It's actually a good point that you are raising, because remember there's been the regional events as well.
Yes.
We could not get to all of them, but we would cover them and then reflect them either same day or a day later. That could potentially be the way in which it will be done.
I think last but not least, Comrade Hage, I think if one looks at it, the world is going to be watching what Namibia does and how we communicate. Of course, the responsibility, we drive the authority from the act as NBC, but we know that because of the digital media, the whole country basically is a source of information with our views on social media platforms, etc. We don't want to direct people how they need to speak, but what is the information you want to share with Namibians in terms of the posture we should take collectively as a country in terms of the information we relay over the next few days?
Look, the first thing that I personally has observed, it's the element of unity around the late, unprecedented. I mean, I've been reflecting on speaking to people, personally reflecting on what I see on NBC, on radio. So I think that's the spirit. Because what Namibia has done, and it wouldn't matter from which understanding you would be coming, we found a unifying space here that said that, look, I'm first Namibian and this is my president. So the same, I think, must permeate. And then one of the things that came out quite strong, it's the sense of respecting the rule of law. I mean, someone was saying, most probably jokingly, that in other countries, when these type of things happen, then there's war, people are fighting, and then you see chairs flying.
Armies, police
but
on the
for
street.
us, it was so seamless, and it allowed me, you, and everybody else to mourn in the fashion that they came to know who the late president was. And I think that's the spirit that categorizes who and what Namibians are. Extremely positive, even in the face of things not working well from a mourning perspective.
Well, thank you very much, TG, for making time out to join us this morning.
Always a pleasure.
Well, of course, as you can hear there, the Director General of the NBC, Stanley Similo, talking to us about NBC's readiness to cover the official memorial as well as the funeral of the late president. Since the passing, of course, about exactly 16 days in terms of broadcasting, it's all systems go here as well on TV, radio, as well as on our online platform. So please do make sure to stay tuned to all of those to be informed of everything that will be happening over the next few days. Stay with us.